Jinwoo Park pressed his face against the cold metal window of the transport ship. Stars filled the darkness outside like tiny diamonds scattered on black cloth. He had never seen so many stars at once. Back home on New Bizan, the thick atmosphere made everything look fuzzy and dim. The ship shook as it came closer to Kepler Station. Jinwoo grabbed his small bag and checked his things one more time. He had his grandfather's old hunting knife, some rope, a water bottle, and the compass that had belonged to his family for 3 generations. The other passengers had fancy electronic devices and weapons that glowed with strange lights. Jinwoo's gear looked like old junk next to their equipment. "First time off-world?" asked Hanwoo Kim, another human student sitting across from him. She wore a clean uniform and carried a modern tablet computer. Her voice was kind, but Jinwoo could hear something else in it. Maybe pity. Jinwoo nodded. "Yes, first time leaving New Bizan too." Hanwoo smiled, but it looked forced. "Don't worry. Just stay quiet and try not to embarrass humanity too much." The words stung. Jinwoo had worked for 2 years to earn this spot in the cultural exchange program. He scored highest on all the survival tests back home. But he knew what Hanwoo saw when she looked at him. A farm boy from a backward colony who didn't belong among the stars. The ship docked with a loud clang. Jinwoo followed the other passengers through metal corridors that stretched in every direction. Kepler Station was bigger than his entire hometown. Lights blinked everywhere, and strange sounds echoed off the walls. Then he saw them, the Vorthak. Students stood in the main docking bay like living mountains. Each one was at least 8 feet tall with thick scales covering their bodies. Their eyes glowed yellow in the station's artificial light. When they moved, their claws clicked against the metal floor. "Welcome, softskins," said the largest Vorthak. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "I am Groktal. These are my huntmates Vexnara and Zefkor." The other Vorthak students laughed. It was not a nice sound. Jinwoo had studied the Vorthak language before coming to the station. He understood that softskins was not meant as a friendly greeting. It was what Vorthak called weak creatures that couldn't survive in the wild. "Thank you for the welcome," said So Young Lee, another human student. She stood straight and tried to look confident, but Jinwoo noticed her hands shaking. Groktal's yellow eyes moved across the human students and stopped on Jinwoo. The big alien tilted his head like a bird studying a bug. "What is this small one? A child?" "I am 19 years old," Jinwoo said quietly. The Vorthak students burst into loud laughter. Vexnara, whose scales were darker than the others, stepped closer. 19 summers and still so tiny? Do your people never grow? Or are you just broken?" Jinwoo felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he said nothing. His grandfather had taught him that words meant less than actions. "A wise hunter watches and learns before he speaks," the old man used to say. Dr. Haijin Choi, the human supervisor, stepped forward. She was older than the students and wore the uniform of a xenobiologist. "Please excuse us. We are still adjusting to station gravity." "Of course," Groktal said, showing his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "We understand. Not all species are built for strength." The tour of the station took 3 hours. Jinwoo walked behind the group, listening and watching. The Vorthak students pointed out their training areas, their hunting trophies, and their advanced weapons. Every room seemed designed to show how superior they were. When they reached the main training center, Groktal picked up a metal bar from the equipment rack. It was as thick as Jinwoo's arm and longer than he was tall. "This is what we use for basic strength training," Groktal said. He lifted the bar over his head with one hand like it weighed nothing. "Even our youngest cubs can handle this easily." He set the bar down in front of Jinwoo. "Perhaps the small soft skin would like to try?" Jinwoo looked at the bar. He could tell it was extremely heavy just by how it sat on the floor. The metal had worn spots where many hands had gripped it. This was clearly some kind of test. "Go ahead," whispered Hanwoo. "Just try your best." Jinwoo bent down and wrapped both hands around the bar. He pulled with all his strength. The bar moved a few inches off the ground, then crashed back down with a loud clang. His arms shook from the effort. The Vortex students roared with laughter. Even some of the other human students looked away in embarrassment. Perhaps the dirt crawler should stick to softer prey, Zefkor said. His scales were covered in ritual, scars that marked him as a proven warrior despite his young age. Maybe he can hunt grass or small insects. Jinwoo stood up slowly. His face burned with shame, but he kept his expression calm. He had learned long ago that showing pain only made bullies worse. The day grows late, Dr. Choi said quickly. Perhaps we should show our guests to their quarters. As the group moved toward the residential areas, Jinwoo fell further behind. He could hear the Vortex students still laughing and making jokes about the weak humans. Some of the human students joined in the laughter, trying to fit in with their powerful hosts. The quarters were small, but clean. Jinwoo's room had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into space. He sat on the bed and pulled out his grandfather's compass. The old metal was warm in his hands. His grandfather had been the best hunter in New Bizen. He could track anything through the thick forests and catch fish in streams that seemed empty. But he had never left the planet. He died thinking the stars were just lights in the sky. What would you do here, grandfather? Jinwoo whispered to the empty room, through the walls. He could hear the Vortex students talking about something called the Trial of Hunters. It was some kind of competition that would happen soon. From what Jinwoo could understand, it involved hunting dangerous creatures in the station's holographic training areas. The softskins will never survive it, Kroktal was saying. But it would be funny to watch them try. Jinwoo lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and probably more humiliation. But something his grandfather used to say came back to him. The smallest hunter sometimes catches the biggest prey, because no one expects him to succeed. Outside his window, the stars continued their ancient dance across the darkness. Jinwoo watched them until he fell asleep, still holding his grandfather's compass in his hand. 3 weeks had passed since Jinwoo arrived at Kepler Station. Each day brought new lessons in how different he was from everyone else. The Vortex students continued to treat him like a pet that had learned a few tricks. The other human students tried to be kind, but Jinwoo could see the embarrassment in their eyes when he struggled with the advanced technology. Jin-Woo spent most of his free time in the observation decks, watching ships come and go. He studied how the different species moved and acted. The Vortex always walked like they owned everything around them. The humans tried to copy that confidence but never quite managed it. Other aliens kept to themselves, watching everyone with careful eyes. He was sitting in his favorite corner when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the station. The calm voice of the computer spoke over the noise. Emergency Protocol 7 activated. All personnel report to secure areas immediately. Void stalkers have breached containment in sections 12 through 15. Jinwoo had read about Void stalkers in the station's database. They were creatures made of living shadow that could turn invisible and fed on electrical energy. They had no solid form, which made them almost impossible to kill with normal weapons. Most importantly, they were smart. They hunted in packs and could learn from their mistakes. The corridors filled with people running toward the safe zones. Jinwoo moved against the crowd, heading toward the emergency stairs. He wanted to see what was happening. On level 12, he found chaos. Security teams ran back and forth with heavy weapons and scanning equipment. Their energy detectors beeped wildly, but the readings made no sense. The stalkers were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. 2 more guards down in Section 14. A security officer reported over his radio. These things are picking us off one by one. We can't get a clear shot. Jinwoo pressed himself against the wall and watched. The guards were using all their advanced training and expensive equipment, but they were fighting like humans from his time period would fight wild animals. They tried to overpower the stalkers with superior firepower and technology, but these weren't normal animals. Jinwoo had hunted enough back home to recognize the pattern. The stalkers weren't just killing randomly. They were defending territory. He slipped away from the security teams and made his way to the abandoned sections. Here, the lights had failed and emergency power cast strange shadows on the walls. Jinwoo pulled out his grandfather's compass and held it steady. The needle pointed toward magnetic north, but more importantly, it showed him which way the air was moving, back home. His grandfather had taught him that all predators followed certain rules. They used the wind to hide their scent. They followed water sources because prey animals needed to drink. Most importantly, they marked their territory and defended it from intruders. Jinwoo closed his eyes and listened. Past the alarm sounds and distant shouting, he could hear something else. A soft humming like electricity moving through wires. But the power was out in this section. The sound had to be coming from the stalkers themselves. He followed the sound deeper into the abandoned area. His knife felt small in his hand, but it was all he had. The stalkers were made of energy, not solid matter. His blade wouldn't hurt them, but Jinwoo wasn't planning to fight them directly. The humming grew louder as he reached what used to be a storage area. Broken equipment lay scattered across the floor. In the center of the room, the air seemed to shimmer like heat waves. That had to be where the stalkers were hiding. Jinwoo remembered something from his grandfather's hunting stories. When you can't see your prey, make them come to you. He pulled out his rope and began setting up a simple trap. Not for the stalkers themselves, but for the electrical cables that ran through the walls. If he could create a power surge in the right place, it might force the creatures to move. Working in the dark, Jinwoo used his knife to strip insulation from several cables. Then he connected them together in a pattern his grandfather had taught him for catching fish with electrical current from the colony's generators. When he touched the wires together, sparks flew. The humming sound became a shriek of anger. The stalkers had been feeding on the station's backup power, and Jinwoo had just disrupted their food source. 3 shapes materialized in the air around him. They looked like smoke-given form, with glowing eyes that burned like stars. Their claws were made of pure energy that could slice through metal. Jinwoo didn't run. Instead, he stood perfectly still and listened. His grandfather had taught him that panicking was the fastest way to die in the wild. When the predator shows itself, that's when you learn how to beat it. The stalkers circled him, but they didn't attack immediately. They were studying him, trying to understand what he was. Jinwoo noticed that they moved in a specific pattern, always staying near the power sources in the walls. He slowly reached into his bag and pulled out his water bottle. Then he poured the water onto the exposed electrical cables. The reaction was immediate. Electricity arced through the water, creating a web of energy that the stalkers couldn't resist. They dove toward the power source like moths toward a flame. Jinwoo was ready. As the first stalker reached for the electrical energy, he grabbed a broken piece of metal from the floor and jammed it into the water-covered cables. The explosion of light filled the room. The stalker screamed as the electrical feedback tore through its energy form. It dissolved into nothing, leaving only the smell of burned ozone. The other 2 stalkers backed away, but Jinwoo had learned their weakness. They were addicted to electrical energy. They couldn't resist it any more than a hungry animal could ignore fresh meat. He began moving through the abandoned sections, creating more electrical traps. Each time the stalkers came to feed, and each time Jinwoo was waiting with his simple but effective counterdash attacks. By the time the security teams found him, Jinwoo was sitting in the main generator room with the bodies of 6 void stalkers scattered around him. His clothes were torn and he had burns on his hands from the electrical work, but he was alive. "How did you do this?" asked Commander Sujin Yoon, the human military advisor. She stared at the dissolved remains of the creatures that had killed 12 trained security guards. "They were hungry," Jinwoo said simply. "I gave them more food than they could handle." Word of what happened spread quickly through the station. The Vortex students who had mocked Jinwoo now looked at him with confusion. Groktal cornered him in the cafeteria the next day. "You use tricks," the big alien said. His yellow eyes were angry. "Real hunters don't need tricks. They use strength and superior weapons." Jinwoo looked up at him calmly. The stalkers are dead. Your superior weapons could not kill them. You were lucky, Vexnara added. Luck is not skill. But Dr. Choi had been studying the security recordings. She called Jinwoo to her office that afternoon. You didn't just get lucky, she said. You understood something about the stalkers that our experts missed. How did you know they would be attracted to electrical surges? Jinwoo thought about how to explain it. My grandfather taught me to hunt animals by understanding what they need to survive. Food, water, shelter. The stalkers needed energy like animals need food. When something is hungry enough, it becomes careless. Dr. Choi nodded slowly. You turn their strength into their weakness. All predators have weaknesses, Jinwoo said. You just have to know how to look for them. That night, Jinwoo sat by his window and watched the stars. His grandfather's compass sat on the desk beside him, its needle pointing steadily toward magnetic north. He thought about the Vorthix students and their mockery. They still saw him as a weak human who had gotten lucky, but something had changed. Other species on the station were starting to notice him. A few had even nodded respectfully when they passed him in the corridors. They had heard about the young human who hunted void stalkers with nothing but simple tools and clever thinking. Jinwoo smiled as he remembered his grandfather's words. The prey that looks weakest is sometimes the most dangerous, because it has learned to survive by using its mind instead of its claws. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for the first time, since arriving at Kepler Station, Jinwoo felt like he belonged among the stars. The news of Jinwoo's victory over the Void Stalkers spread through Kepler Station like wildfire. Aliens who had never spoken to him before now nodded when they passed him in the corridors. Some even stopped to ask questions about his hunting methods, but the Vorthix students were not impressed. Tricks and luck, Groktal said loudly in the cafeteria. Any real warrior knows that true strength comes from facing your enemy with honor, not hiding in the shadows like a coward. Jinwoo sat at his usual table, eating quietly while the big alien made his speech. The other diners listened with interest. Vorthix were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest warriors, so their opinions about combat carried weight. The soft skin got lucky once, Vexnara added, but luck runs out. A true hunter proves himself again and again. Zefkor leaned forward, his scarred scales catching the light. I challenge the dirt crawler to prove his worth in honorable combat. Let us see how his tricks work against a real opponent. The cafeteria grew quiet. Formal challenges were serious business among the Vorthix. To refuse would mark Jinwoo as a coward in the eyes of every warrior species on the station. Jinwoo set down his eating utensils and looked up at the three towering aliens. I accept your challenge. Groktal's teeth showed in a predatory smile. Excellent. We will meet in the holographic combat arenas tomorrow. You may choose the environment. All environments, Jinwoo said calmly. One fight in each of the 5 standard combat zones. The Vorthix students exchanged glances. They had expected him to choose something safe, maybe a forest environment where he might have some advantage. Fighting in all 5 zones would test every aspect of combat skill. Bold words from such a small creature, Groktal said. Very well. We will see how bold you are when facing real opposition. That night, Jinwoo studied the combat arena specifications on his computer. The 5 standard environments were designed to test different warrior abilities: urban warfare, asteroid mining facilities, jungle planets, Arctic wastelands, and zero-gravity space stations. Each environment came with its own weapons and equipment. The Vorthix had trained in these arenas since childhood. They knew every hiding spot, every tactical advantage, every way to use the equipment. Jinwoo had never set foot in any of them. Dr. Choi visited his quarters before the matches began. You don't have to do this, she said. No one will think less of you for backing down from 3 trained warriors. Yes, they will, Jinwoo replied. And they would be right to think less of me if I ran away from a fair fight. Fair? Dr. Choi laughed bitterly. 3 against 1 is not fair. These aliens have been training for combat their entire lives. Jinwoo picked up his grandfather's compass and tested the needle. It swung toward magnetic north just like always. My grandfather used to say that life is never fair. The deer doesn't get a fair chance against the wolf. The fish doesn't get a fair chance against the net. Fairness is something humans invented because we were tired of losing. The first fight took place in the urban warfare zone. Holographic buildings stretched in every direction, complete with destructible walls and hidden weapon caches. Groktal chose this environment because Vorthok were famous for their building-to-building combat techniques. Jinwoo spawned at one end of the simulated city with basic armor and a standard energy rifle. Groktal appeared 6 blocks away with the same equipment. The rules were simple. Last warrior standing wins. Groktal immediately began moving toward Jinwoo's position, using his species' natural ability to climb walls and leap between buildings. His strategy was obvious: use superior strength and speed to close distance quickly and end the fight in close combat. Jinwoo took a different approach. Instead of running or hiding, he began systematically destroying the buildings around him. His energy rifle wasn't powerful enough to bring down entire structures, but he could weaken support beams and create controlled collapses. When Groktal reached Jinwoo's original position, he found only rubble and debris. The small human had disappeared into a maze of fallen concrete and twisted metal. "Come out and fight like a warrior," Groktal roared, his voice echoing through the ruins. Jinwoo's answer came in the form of a concrete block that crashed down from above. Groktal dodged easily, but the impact created a dust cloud that obscured his vision. More debris began falling. As Jinwoo continued his systematic destruction of the urban environment, the big Vorthok realized too late what was happening. Jinwoo wasn't hiding, he was reshaping the battlefield to his advantage. The carefully designed urban combat zone had become a chaotic demolition site where size and strength meant less than quick thinking and adaptation. When the dust finally settled, Groktal lay unconscious under a carefully placed pile of rubble. Jinwoo had won the first match. The second fight was in the asteroid mining facility. Vexnara chose this environment because the low gravity and industrial equipment favored creatures with natural climbing abilities. The Vorthok student was confident that Jinwoo's human physiology would be a disadvantage in the artificial environment, but Jinwoo had grown up on a farming colony where heavy machinery was part of daily life. While Vexnara tried to use the mining equipment as weapons, Jinwoo turned the entire facility into a trap. He used the conveyor belts or crushers and processing equipment to create a deadly obstacle course that channeled his opponent into predictable paths. Vexnara's superior speed and agility meant nothing when every corridor led to another mechanical hazard. The fight ended when the Vorthok student was caught in an ore processing unit that Jinwoo had rigged to activate remotely. The third fight took place in the jungle environment, which should have been Jinwoo's strongest zone. Zefkor was the most experienced of the 3 Vorthok students, with ritual scars that marked him as a proven hunter. He expected the human to rely on primitive tracking skills and forest knowledge. Instead, Jinwoo did something unexpected. He ignored the jungle entirely and headed straight for the environment's weather control system. Every holographic environment had hidden maintenance areas that controlled temperature, humidity, and atmospheric conditions. While Zefkor searched for him in the underbrush, Jinwoo was reprogramming the weather patterns. He created sudden temperature changes that confused scent trails, altered humidity levels that affected visibility, and triggered rainstorms that turned the forest floor into a muddy swamp. Zefkor found himself fighting not just his human opponent, but the jungle itself. When Jinwoo finally appeared for the final confrontation, the Vorthok warrior was exhausted, disoriented, and covered in mud. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. By the time the 4th and 5th matches were scheduled, word had spread throughout the station. The observation areas around the combat arenas were packed with aliens from dozens of different species. They had come to see the small human who was defeating trained Vorthok warriors through tactics they had never seen before. Commander Su Jin-yoon watched from the command center with growing amazement. "He's not just winning," she told Dr. Choi. He's teaching them that there are completely different ways to think about combat. The Arctic and zero-gravity matches followed the same pattern. Jinwoo studied each environment like a puzzle to be solved rather than a battlefield to be conquered. He used the artificial weather systems, the life support equipment, and even the holographic projection mechanisms themselves as tools and weapons. Each victory was hard-fought and clever rather than dominant. Jinwoo was never the stronger fighter, but he was always the more creative one. He turned the Vorthik students' own expectations against them, using their confidence and traditional training methods as weaknesses to exploit. When the last match ended, the three Vorthik students lay defeated in their respective arenas. The observation areas erupted in amazement. Aliens who had dismissed humans as a weak species now looked at Jinwoo with respect and curiosity. Groktal was the first to approach him after the medical teams finished their work. The big alien's pride was clearly wounded, but his eyes showed something new, genuine respect. "You fight like no warrior I've ever seen," Groktal said slowly. "Is this how all humans battle?" Jinwoo shook his head. "This is how hunters from New Bizan learn to survive. We adapt to our environment instead of trying to overpower it." "Teach us," Vexnara said suddenly. The other two Vorthik students looked shocked at her request. "I want to learn these methods." Jinwoo smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "My grandfather always said that the best way to honor a worthy opponent is to learn from them. I would be happy to share what I know." As the crowd dispersed, Jinwoo noticed something important. He was no longer walking alone through the station corridors. Aliens from various species fell into step beside him, asking questions about his tactics and offering to share their own combat knowledge. For the first time since leaving New Bizan, Jinwoo felt like he truly belonged among the stars. But he had no idea that his reputation was about to reach the most dangerous ears in the galaxy. The message arrived on a priority channel that made every communication device on Kepler Station ring at the same time. 3 simple words appeared on every screen: "Kethmore comes hunting." Jinwoo was in the cafeteria when the announcement echoed through the station's speakers. Every conversation stopped. Aliens from dozens of species turned to look at each other with expressions of fear and excitement. "Who is Kethmore?" Jinwoo asked Anu, who had gone completely pale. "Supreme Hunter of the Vorthik Empire," she whispered. "The most dangerous warrior in known space. He once tracked a phase dragon across 3 star systems and killed it with nothing but primitive weapons." Dr. Choi appeared at their table, her face serious. "Jinwoo, we need to talk now." In her office, Dr. Choi activated the privacy screens and sat down heavily. "Kethmore is coming because of you. Word of your victories over his students has reached the Vorthik homeworld." "Am I in trouble?" Jinwoo asked. "I don't know," Dr. Choi admitted. "No one knows what Kethmore wants when he decides to visit somewhere. Sometimes he comes to hunt dangerous creatures. Sometimes he comes to test new warriors. Sometimes he just comes to remind everyone that he exists." Through the office window, Jinwoo could see the docking bays where ships were already beginning to leave. Many aliens were deciding not to stay on the station while the Supreme Hunter was present. "What should I do?" Jinwoo asked. Dr. Choi looked at him for a long moment. "Be yourself. It's gotten you this far." Kethmore's ship arrived 2 days later. It was smaller than Jinwoo had expected, built for speed and stealth rather than size. The hull was covered in hunting trophies from 100 different worlds. Scales, claws, and bones from creatures that most beings only heard about in nightmares. The Supreme Hunter himself was even more impressive than his reputation suggested. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, his scales darker and thicker than the younger Vorthak. Scars covered his body like a map of battles fought and won. His eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Jinwoo think of the old wolves back on New Bizan, predators that had survived long enough to become legends. When Kethmore walked through the station, every other creature moved out of his way. He radiated danger like heat from a fire. Even the station's security system seemed to recognize him as Something beyond their ability to control. Jinwu watched from an observation deck as the Supreme Hunter toured the combat arenas where the matches had taken place. Kethmore spent a long time examining the recordings of each fight, studying Jinwu's tactics with the focus of a scientist analyzing a new species. "Interesting," Kethmore said when he finally spoke. His voice was deeper than the younger Vorthak, like distant thunder. "The small hunter fights like prey that has learned to think like a predator." Groktal, Vexnara, and Zefkor stood nearby, clearly nervous about explaining their defeats to their supreme hunter, but Kethmore seemed more curious than angry. "Tell me about this human," he said. "Not what he did, but how he thinks." Groktal struggled to find words. "He does not fight like a warrior, Supreme Hunter. He fights like ... like the environment itself is his weapon. He makes us fight his battle instead of our own," Vexnara added. "Every time we thought we understood his strategy, he would change." "The rules?" Kethmore nodded slowly. "Show me these recordings again." For 3 hours, the Supreme Hunter watched every second of Jinwu's fights. He paid special attention to the moments when Jinwu adapted his tactics to counter his opponent's strengths. When the recordings ended, Kethmore was silent for a long time. "Bring the human to me," he finally said. Jin-Wu was escorted to the main conference room by a squad of nervous security guards. When the doors opened, he found himself alone with the most feared warrior in the galaxy. Kethmore sat at the far end of a long table, perfectly still except for his glowing eyes that tracked Jinwu's every movement. "Sit," Kethmore said. Jin-Wu took the chair at the opposite end of the table. His grandfather's compass felt heavy in his pocket. He wished the old man could see him now, face to face with a living legend. "You defeated 3 of my best students," Kethmore said. "They are young, but they are not weak. How did a creature from a backwater world learn to hunt so effectively?" "My grandfather taught me," Jinwu replied honestly. "He said that every prey animal has something to teach about survival, and every predator has something to teach about hunting." "Wise words," Kethmore said. "But you are not hunting animals on your homeworld now. You are among the stars, facing creatures that your grandfather never dreamed of. How do you adapt his lessons to new situations?" Jinwu thought carefully before answering. "The rules change, but the principles stay the same. Every creature needs food, water, shelter, and safety. Every creature has strengths and weaknesses. If you understand what something needs and what it fears, you can predict how it will behave." Kethmore leaned forward slightly. "And what do you think I need, small hunter?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Jinwu knew that his answer might determine whether he lived or died. He looked into the Supreme Hunter's glowing eyes and saw something unexpected: loneliness. "You need a worthy challenge," Jinwu said slowly. "You have become so good at hunting that nothing can surprise you anymore. That's why you came here. Not to punish me for defeating your students, but to see if I might be different enough to make hunting interesting again." For the first time since arriving on the station, Kethmore smiled. It was not a pleasant expression on a face designed for warfare, but it was genuine. "You see clearly for such a young creature," he said. "Yes, I am bored. I have hunted every dangerous species in known space. I have faced armies and won. I have tracked prey across dimensions and through time itself. But I have never hunted anything like you." Jinwu felt his heart racing, but he kept his voice steady. "What kind of hunt did you have in mind?" Kethmore stood up, his massive form casting a shadow across the table. The ancient Vorthak had a ritual called the Truth Hunt. 2 hunters enter the same territory. Each is both predator and prey. They must hunt each other while surviving the dangers of the environment itself. "That sounds dangerous," Jinwu said. "It is meant to be," Kethmore replied. "The Truth Hunt reveals the essence of what a warrior truly is. Strip away all advantages of technology and numbers and superior strength. In the end, only pure hunting skill matters." Jinwu thought about his grandfather's compass, pointing steadily toward magnetic north no matter what storms raged around. I accept your challenge." Kethmore's smile grew wider. "I hoped you would say that." We will use the station's most dangerous holographic environment, the crimson reaches of my homeworld. Even virtual versions of those creatures have killed experienced warriors. When do we begin? Jinwoo asked. Tomorrow at dawn, station time, Kethmore said. Tonight you should rest and prepare yourself. Make peace with whatever gods your people. Worship, win or lose, you will face death before the sun sets. As Jinwoo left the conference room, he noticed something that made him smile despite the danger ahead. Other aliens in the corridors no longer looked at him with pity or amusement. Now they looked at him with the same respect they showed Kethmore. Himself, he was no longer just a human from a backwater colony. He was a hunter who had earned the attention of the galaxy's greatest predator. That night, Jinwoo sat by his window and watched the stars. His grandfather's compass rested in his palm, its needle steady and true. Tomorrow he would face the ultimate test of everything the old man had taught him. But tonight, for the first time since leaving New Bizen, Jinwoo felt truly ready for whatever the galaxy might throw at him. The holographic environment of the Crimson Reaches materialized around Jinwoo like a nightmare made real. Red sand stretched to the horizon under a sky that burned with the light of twin suns. Strange rock formations twisted upward like the bones of dead giants. In the distance he could hear the hunting calls of creatures that had no names in any human language. Jinwoo checked his equipment one last time. He had his grandfather's knife, some rope, a water container, and a basic energy weapon with limited charges. Kethmore had the same gear. Spawned somewhere else in the vast digital landscape. The rules were simple: survive for 3 days while hunting each other. The environment was filled with dangerous creatures, poisonous plants, and deadly weather. Patterns. Victory came through killing your opponent or forcing them to surrender. Failure meant death, even in a simulation. The holographic systems were advanced enough to cause real, physical trauma. Jinwoo found shelter in a cave system. During the first day, the rocks provided protection from the twin suns and the acid storms that swept across the landscape every few hours. More importantly, the caves allowed him to study the ecosystem without being seen. The Crimson Reaches were home to dozens of predator species, pack hunters that moved like liquid shadow, flying creatures with razor-sharp wings that could slice through metal, burrowing worms that could sense vibrations from miles away. Each species had evolved to fill a specific role in this hellish environment, but Jinwoo noticed something important. Despite being different species, all the predators followed similar patterns. They avoided certain areas during the day. They all drank from the same water sources. Most importantly, they all feared something that lived in the deepest caves. On the second day, Jinwoo began leaving subtle signs for Kethmore to follow. Broken branches, disturbed sand, traces of his scent near water sources. He wasn't trying to hide. He was drawing the Supreme Hunter toward a specific location. Kethmore, meanwhile, was hunting with the patience of a creature that had spent centuries perfecting his skills. He moved through the landscape like a ghost, reading every sign and tracking every disturbance. By the end of the second day, he had found 3 of Jinwoo's temporary shelters and was closing the distance between them. The Supreme Hunter was impressed despite himself. The small human was leaving a trail that was challenging to follow but not impossible. It showed respect for Kethmore's abilities while demonstrating real skill at wilderness survival. What Kethmore didn't realize was that Jinwoo was leading him into the territory of the apex predator that even the other creatures feared. On the third morning, Jinwoo positioned himself on a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow canyon. This was where the local water source flowed between high stone walls. Every creature in the area had to come here eventually to drink, including whatever lived in the deep caves. Kethmore arrived just as the twin suns reached their highest point. He moved cautiously through the canyon, every sense alert for traps or ambush points. His hunting instincts told him that Jinwoo was nearby, but he couldn't pinpoint the exact location. "I know you are here, small hunter," Kethmore called out. His voice echoed off the canyon walls. "You have led me a fine chase, but now it is time to end this game." Jinwoo's voice came from somewhere above. "It's not a game, Supreme Hunter, and it's not over yet." A rock slide crashed down from the canyon walls, but Kethmore was too experienced to be caught by such a simple trap. He dodged easily and began climbing toward Jinwoo's position. That was when the real predator arrived. The ground shook as something massive emerged from the cave system beneath the canyon. It was larger than both hunters combined, with armored scales that glowed like molten metal. Its roar shattered rocks and sent smaller creatures fleeing in terror. Kethmore found himself trapped between the creature below and Jinwoo above. The Supreme Hunter's eyes widened as he realized what had happened. The human hadn't been running from him for 3 days. He had been herding both of them toward this encounter. "You cannot control such a beast," Kethmore shouted over the creatures. "Roars, I don't need to control it," Jinwoo replied, sliding down the canyon wall with his rope. "I just need to understand what it wants." The massive predator was hungry and territorial. It had been sleeping in the deep caves until the vibrations from their chase woke it up. Now it saw 2 small creatures in its feeding ground and planned to eliminate both threats. Jinwoo had studied this creature's behavior patterns for 2 days. He knew it was nearly blind but hunted by sound and heat. He also knew it was too large to move quickly in the narrow canyon as the beast charged toward them. Jinwoo did something that shocked Kethmore. He ran directly at the creature instead of away from it. At the last second, Jinwoo dove between the creature's legs and began attacking its soft underbelly with his knife. The beast roared in pain and rage, thrashing wildly as it tried to reach the small human beneath it. Kethmore watched in amazement as Jinwoo turned the creature's own size against it. Every time the beast tried to bite or claw, its massive body got in its own way. The narrow canyon that should have been a trap for the hunters became a prison for the predator. "The joints!" Jinwoo shouted to Kethmore. "Attack the joints where the armor plates meet." Without thinking, Kethmore joined the battle. The Supreme Hunter had spent his entire life hunting alone, but something about Jinwoo's tactical brilliance made cooperation feel natural. They worked together like they had trained for years, each covering the other's weaknesses. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When the great beast finally fell, both hunters were covered in its glowing blood and exhausted from the fight. They stood facing each other in the canyon, weapons ready for the final confrontation. But something had changed during the battle. Kethmore looked at Jinwoo with new eyes. "You did not need to help me fight that creature," the Supreme Hunter said slowly. "You could have let it kill me and claimed victory." Jinwoo lowered his knife. "My grandfather taught me that a true hunter never wastes good prey on something else's hunt. Besides, fighting that thing alone would have been stupid." Kethmore laughed, a sound that had not been heard in the galaxy for decades. "You speak wisdom beyond your years, young brother." The word brother hung in the air between them. In Vorthic culture, that term was sacred. It meant more than friendship or alliance. It meant absolute trust and shared honor. "I have hunted across 1,000 worlds," Kethmore said, setting down his own weapon. "I have faced creatures that could destroy planets and warriors who could lead armies. But I have never hunted beside anyone who understood the true spirit of the hunt as you do." The holographic environment began to fade as the simulation ended. They were back in the combat arena, surrounded by monitoring equipment and medical teams. But the bond forged in the digital wilderness was completely real, Commander. Sujin Yoon stared at the readings from her console. "Both hunters are declaring the trial ended in mutual victory. That's never happened before in recorded Vorthak history." In the days that followed, everything changed for Jinwoo. Kethmore performed the rite of the blood hunt in the station's main assembly area, witnessed by representatives from dozens of species. The ancient ceremony formally recognized Jinwoo as a hunting brother of the Supreme Hunter. Himself, the Vorthic students who had once mocked him now approached with requests to learn his methods. Groktal was the first to ask for training in human hunting techniques. "Teach me to think like prey that has become predator," he said with genuine respect. Ambassador Kyung-Soo Beek, the senior human diplomat, could barely contain his excitement. "Do you realize what you've accomplished? You've opened doors that diplomacy couldn't touch." The Vorthic Empire wants to establish formal hunting partnerships with human colonies. But the greatest honor came when Kethmore invited Jinwu to join his ship's crew for a hunt beyond the edges of known space. A creature called a stellar leviathan had been attacking ships in the outer systems, and the Supreme Hunter wanted to track it down. "This will be dangerous beyond anything you have faced," Kethmore warned. "Stellar leviathans are older than most civilizations. They hunt in the spaces between stars." Jinwu smiled and pulled out his grandfather's compass. The needle pointed steadily toward magnetic north, just as it always had. "My grandfather used to say that the biggest hunts require the steadiest nerves." As Kethmore's ship prepared to leave Kepler Station, Jinwu stood on the observation deck and watched the stars. Hanul and So-Young had come to see him off, along with many of the aliens who had witnessed his transformation from scorned outsider to respected hunter. "You've changed everything," Dr. Choi said. "Humans will never be seen the same way in galactic society." Jinwu shook his head. "I didn't change anything. I just showed them what my grandfather always knew, that worth isn't measured by size or strength or technology. It's measured by how well you understand the world around you and how cleverly you adapt to survive." The ship's engines hummed to life as they prepared for departure. Over the intercom, Kethmore's voice echoed through the corridors. "Attention, crew. We hunt not as separate species today, but as brothers of the hunt. Let the galaxy know that true strength comes not from the world of your birth, but from the courage in your heart and the wisdom in your mind.